Chairman, the stream is live.
Okay. Welcome to the Board of Education Audit Committee meeting. I would like to call the meeting to order. Dr. Albright, may I have a roll call, please?
Heather Benavides.
I'm here.
Courtney Jackson. Acting Superintendent Gabriella Blakey.
Here.
Renette Apodaca
Here.
and Ronaldo Tomorito.
Here. So our first item is to consider adoption of the June 25th, 2024 Audit Committee meeting agenda. Do I have any?
I move that we consider adoption of the June 25th, 2024 Audit Committee meeting agenda. This is Heather.
Is there a second?
I second. This is Renette.
Thank you. Dr. Albright, can we have a roll call for vote?
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Gabriella Blakey.
Yes.
Renette Apodaca.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes. So our next item, number 3, is to consider approval of the minutes from the Audit Committee meeting on April 23rd, 2024. Do I have a motion?
I will move that we consider approval of the minutes from the Audit Committee meeting on April 23rd, 2024. This is Heather.
Thank you. And is there a second?
I'll second. This is Renette.
Thank you, Renette. And Dr. Albright, can we have a roll call for the vote?
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Gabriella Blakey.
Yes.
Renette Apodaca.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes. So moving right along, we're at 4.1. Our next item to consider approval for is our 2 Audit Committee community member positions. And so per our state statute, 2 community members serve on the Audit Committee. Currently, openings exist for a volunteer member who is a parent of a student attending the school district, and the other volunteer member will have experience in accounting or financial matters. These volunteers will serve 2-year terms on the Audit Committee, with the term running through June of 2026. After receiving interest in the volunteer positions, staff recommends that Sarah Vizargo, am I pronouncing that right? A community member with a student currently attending an APS school, and Sarah McCoy, a community member with experience in accounting or financial matters, serve 2 terms on the Audit Committee. Both volunteers are with us today. Are they here?
Yes, hello, this is Sarah McCoy.
Oh, Sarah, sorry about that. I was looking for, okay. And so let's, do I have a motion that we go ahead and adopt these 2 members to our Audit Committee?
I move that we approve. Hold on, I lost my place.
Savannah, I think that's her name.
Yeah, so I move that we approve the filling of the 2 Audit Committee members with, let's see, I'm going to get their names right. Savannah Visaraga and Sarah McCoy. This is Heather.
Second, this is Gabriella.
And Dr. Albright, can we have a roll call for the vote?
Heather Benavides.
Yes.
Gabriella Blakey.
Yes.
Renette Apodaca.
Yes.
Ronaldo Tomorito.
Yes. So we'd like to congratulate Ms. Vizarga and Ms. McCoy for now being present for our audit committee meeting, and I congratulate you. And now you are members, so thank you. And thank you for volunteering, because I know this is not an easy thing to do, but I appreciate it. Do you guys have anything to say? Are you okay?
Happy to be here and happy to help.
Oh, great. All right then, so our next item for discussion is 5.1, and it's in our external audit entrance conference of Albuquerque Public School for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2024. And we have our presenters here that will go ahead and give us this presentation. Mark
Thank you.
Turnbull, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Blakey. Today's meeting is the entrance conference for the 2023-2024 audit. Every agency and governmental entity has to be audited every year per state law. APS is required to choose a new auditor at least every 8 years and is required to follow the request for proposal process every 4 years. The 2023-2024 year is the final year with Moss Adams under the current 4-year contract. New Mexico statute requires monthly updates to the audit committee during the audit fieldwork process, which is usually scheduled during the 4th week of every month. The exit conference is normally held at the end of October. General audit status information will be shared during the open session in closed meeting in the open session of the meeting, but any issues, findings, and details will only be shared in the closed meetings as required by the state audit rule. All information shared in closed sessions must remain confidential until after the audit is released by the state auditor's office, usually in December or January. Only after that approval from the state auditor can the Board of Education discuss the audit in an open meeting and release the document. The audit document is about 1,000 pages, and there are links on the APS website to the state website for the more recent APS audits. The APS audit includes district charter schools. All the audit documents are heavily regulated. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sheila Herrera. She is the audit engagement partner and lead with Moss Adams.
Thank you, Mr. Turnbull. Good afternoon, board members, members of the audit committee, superintendent. Again, my name is Sheila Herrera. I am a partner here with Moss Adams. And so we are on our final year to complete the audit of Albuquerque Public School District, along with all of the component units, which includes all of the charter schools and Albuquerque Public School Foundation. And so we are required to do an entrance conference under the New Mexico State Audit Rule. I am the partner ultimately in charge of signing of all of the reports that get issued. The district itself, as Mark mentioned, has 1,000 pages. 5 volumes, if anyone is interested in looking at that. And then we do have some standalones that get issued at the charter school level, as well as Albuquerque Public School Foundation has its own financial statements. We do have a QC reviewer at the district level. And so the QC reviewer is responsible for making sure that we've met all of the AICPA audit requirements, along with all of our internal documentation requirements, along with making sure that the financial statements are complete, all the disclosures make sense, and there's nothing that is significant missing from the reports. We do have a senior manager that will be leading the audit this year and has been the consistent for the last few years that we've done the district audit, and that is Sujan. We do have a new manager. Her name is Jody, and she will be in charge of both the financial statement side and the single audit for the federal compliance that we have to do. And then we do have an audit senior this year that will also be in the field on site working with Mark and his team as we move through the audit process here. So as part of the audit, we are engaged to complete the annual financial statement audit for the year ending June 30th, 2024. We are required to communicate the non-attest services here under the Yellow Book standards. And so we do assist management with the preparation of the notes to the financial statements, particularly around the charter schools and the Albuquerque Public School Foundation disclosures that go into the district financial statements. We also assist with the preparation of the schedules of the component unit proportionate shares of the net pension liability and contributions, along with the net other post-employment benefit liability and contributions. There are required supplementary information schedules that go into the financial statements. And so anything that is required specifically for the charter schools, we are assisting with prepping those. We also complete all of the combining statements for all the charter schools, along with all the appendix information for all of those component units. As part of the audit process, the auditor responsibility is to form an opinion on whether the financial statements are materially correct. And so as part of the audit process, we have already started working through our planning process for the year. We started looking at some of the internal controls. We are required to follow the generally accepted auditing standards that are issued by the AICPA, the government auditing standards, which is the Yellow Book requirements, is another set of rules that we have to follow as the auditor. It does require us to look at independence a little bit steeper than if we were doing just a flat AICPA audit. We also have additional continuing education requirements that we have to meet that standard. We also have to follow the New Mexico State Audit Rule. As part of this, the state auditor does require us to look at things like travel and procurement along the way. And so we started to go through some of those state required items as part of our interim process here. And so our job as the auditors, like I said, is to make sure that the financial statements are materially correct. And so we do calculate materiality based off the level of activity each year that is in each of the funds. And then we do look at some of the total funds as one number, depending on what that looks like each year. And so that does change from year to year. As part of our process, we also look at the internal controls within the district, making sure that we can see, for example, proper segregation of duties. We can see documentation over policies and procedures, that if there's approvals that need to happen on certain documentation, that we can see that happening. And so we don't necessarily provide an opinion on the effectiveness of internal controls, but if something does come to our attention along the way, we are required to evaluate it to determine whether it rises to the level of what we call either a significant deficiency or a material weakness, which is there's errors that could happen within the financial statements if this control is not properly in place. And so the state auditor here in New Mexico does require us, though, even if we find something that is immaterial, they do require us to report that as a finding, as an other non-compliance finding. So if you go back into some of the historical financial statements, you'll see quite a few other non-compliance findings for the reason that the state auditor does require us to report those. And so, as Mark noted, our job as the auditors during our monthly check-ins or at the exit conference, we are required to communicate any type of findings that we do identify, either from the financial statement reporting audit or the compliance audit of the federal awards. And so that'll be reported to you all. We do have the component units, like I mentioned, that we audit. And so this is the Albuquerque Public Schools Foundation. We do have 30 charter schools. And then of those charter schools, there are 11 foundations that are included in those charter schools that also require an audit. So all of these have their own opinions that we do provide within the reports. And then some of them have standalone reports that get sent over to the state auditor's office as well. And so we have started our planning process. The planning process does require us to go through a full risk assessment. And related to the risk assessment, we're looking for things that have high inherent risk in general. And so it requires us to determine whether, for our purposes of documentation and how we're going to be able to test certain areas of the financial statements, whether they fall into what we call a significant risk. And so revenue is typically inherently always a significant risk. And so we do quite a bit of work here related to the cash receipts that are received to make sure that those transactions are being properly recorded to the correct general ledger accounts, to the correct funds, and for the correct amounts. And so we also look at the grant awards to make sure that we can see whatever is being requested for reimbursement, that we can see that that is the amount that the district is receiving, that the state's paying that, and that you can see that the amount is flowing through each of the funds correctly. The district does operate on a modified cash basis for the year. And so the financial statement process does require management to go through and record all the accruals at the end of the year. And so this is a very significant process for the management team in making sure all of those accruals, from receivables to payables to accounts payable, accrual liabilities, for example, at the end of the year, get recorded into the trial balance system. There's a lot of GASB specific entries that get made for things like fixed assets, right of use assets, debt. And so all of those entries are one-time entries that get posted each year prior to us starting the audit. And so we do a significant amount of work just making sure that there's no potential cutoff issues or things that could have been missed, because it is a little bit of a manual process to make sure all those accruals do happen appropriately. The other thing that we do spend a lot of time on is the IBNR and the claims expense. There is some lag reports and actuary reports that are received. And so just making sure that those estimates for those reserve calculations are correct and there's no significant potential adjustments that need to be made to those accruals at the end of the year. Usually we're looking a little bit subsequent to year end to make sure that there really isn't anything significant sitting out there that hasn't already been estimated for. Debt, we do send confirmations for all the debt accounts, the bond issuance, any type of refunding. Typically, we're looking at those adjustments. The GASB does overcomplicate some of these entries for sure. And so we want to make sure that those are getting recorded properly in the financial statements. There are some deferred inflows and outflows and amortizations that need to happen for the financial statements to be correct. And so we are looking at that as part of the audit process, since those are significant dollars. And then the last thing is really the compliance with the grant programs. The district does receive a significant amount of federal funds that flow through the New Mexico Public Education Department. And so we have to go through each year and determine which programs need to be audited. And so we do have the ESSER funds that will be a significant program this year again. And then we'll have the special education fund that is the other one. And so those rotate typically between the IDEA B, the Title I, the food distribution. A lot of those rotate from year to year because those are the significant programs that the district does receive. And so we'll have two major programs this year based off the April numbers, and maybe a third one depending on where June ends up. From the auditor responsibility related to fraud, the audit itself is not necessarily designed to look for fraud. We do a full risk assessment at the beginning of the audit process, really looking to make sure, are there any accounts that we think inherently have a higher fraud risk? How do we address this through audit procedures? Internally, we do have team discussions related to how do we make sure we address these fraud risks? Are there things that we see from year to year potentially that even with other clients, how do we, see if there's anything at the district that we need to be concerned about? We do have various fraud interviews with individuals on the management team, with the audit committee, with the superintendent along the way to make sure that there's nothing that is sitting out there that we're not aware of. If there is something that is identified through this process, we are required to communicate that over to the state auditor's office. And then we are required to perform audit procedures to determine how it does impact the financial statements. And so the audit timeline, we did meet with management back in April, just getting an idea of where, what has happened during the year already. To that point, kind of getting a timeline together to make sure that we can meet the state auditor deadline. And so we've started our interim process, going through planning, starting our control testing, starting to look at some of the single audit planning, and then some of those state audit rule required items that we have to test. And so we'll work through that this week as well, along with working through the rest of the single audit control documentation, and then some of the compliance items that we have to start to get through. Obviously, today's the entrance conference, and then we do pick up final field work for the district by the end of September, so that we can really finish up our field work by the end of October, and then meet that November 15th deadline to the state auditor's office. And so everything is completed at that point. The state auditor then reviews the report. It usually takes them a good month and a half to kind of get through that process. We get some comments back, usually on things that they have questions on, potential formatting things that they want corrected, and then it usually gets issued by the end of the year in order to meet some of the deadlines for you all to submit the financial statements for compliance. And so that's really the process for the district side. For the component units, the Albuquerque Public School Foundation does start their audit process in August, and then all of the charter schools will also start all of that audit process August 1st. All of those typically start getting completed by October 15th, so that all the information can start getting combined into the district financial statements. And so we do have several audit deliverables that we include in the reporting package. So in that 5-volume report, we do have the report of independent auditors on the financial statements. And so this includes the opinions of the district itself for all the major funds. We have the opinion over the aggregate remaining funds, the government-wide statements, all the opinions for any charter schools that do not have their standalone report will also be in this report. And then we have our report on internal controls. And so this is our yellow book report under government auditing standards. And so this is where, if there are any findings specifically related to the financial statements, this is where they would be identified. And then we have the report on compliance for each major federal program, which is our single audit on all those federal funds that you all receive. And so if there are any findings, this is where those would be included in that report. We do have the separate reports that we do issue for Albuquerque Public School Foundation, and then about 8 charter schools issue standalones as well, and those are required to be submitted to the state auditor ahead of that November 15th deadline. And then the final document, once everything is completed by the state auditor's office, is the data collection form, which is the information around the federal funds that goes directly to the feds. And so the expectations during the audit process is really making sure that there's limited journal entries after we've started our final field work. We've really worked over the last few years to work with management in making sure that we can provide an appropriate schedule so that we receive all of the requested items by the deadline. All of the adjustments need to be completed at that point so that all the information going into the financial statements is accurate and we can complete our audit process. And so there is a lengthy process of closing all the books and records and all of that. So far, we work with management to make sure that all the timelines, if there's anything that needs to be completed at a later point, we're moving the work around as we need to. If there's any proposed adjustments, our job is to make sure that we've identified those and communicated that with management. If there's any control deficiencies, management is aware of those and is working either to correct them or to respond to them. And then any prior year audit findings, we typically start looking at those during our final field work early on in the process to make sure that either those have been cleared or if there's any adjustments to those findings that need to be discussed, that we have that conversation early on. And so we do have one charter school that we've been informed that will close its doors as of June 30th, 2024. And so in a few days, that charter school will close. There will no longer be a board at that point. And so in the past, when this happens, the district board will also be receiving an update throughout the audit process for William and Josephine Dorn Community Charter School. And we will also include them as part of the exit conference for the district as well. And the management team of the district will also be responsible for signing the final representation letter for us. But that is all I have as part of the entrance conference. Are there any questions?
Okay, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Blakey, I would just like to add a little bit of recognition. We did, as a district, we received the Certificate of Excellence in Financial Reporting from the Association of School Business Officials. I just want to thank Sheila's team because they're a big part of doing the reporting correctly and helping us, and a big part of that. I also want to recognize my district controller, Amanda Boyle. She's the lead on the audit, and she has done a really good job. So I just want to share that with the board. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to clap. That was loud. All right, then, thank you everyone for this presentation, and we got a lot going on until the end of the year, so I look forward to not only us coming together, but as we move forward. So that's gonna do it right now for this meeting, and so our next audit meeting will be July 23rd, 2024 at 5 p.m. For those who may be watching virtually, please watch us on the APS Board of Education YouTube channel. We got a little bit of followers over the state that seem to be watching us. But that's it for us, and I adjourn this meeting. And thank everybody for being here. Thank you.
Thank you all. Great meeting.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Goodbye.